Israeli embassies around the world are flying their flags at half-mast after 2 staff members were shot dead by a lone gunman in Washington, D.C. The couple were shot and killed while leaving an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum in downtown Washington. Police have detained a suspect who chanted pro-Palestinian slogans after being taken into custody.
We believe the shooting was committed by a single suspect who is now in custody. Prior to the shooting, the suspect was observed pacing back and forth outside of the museum. He approached a group of 4 people, produced a handgun, and opened fire, striking both of our decedents. After the shooting, the suspect then entered the museum and was detained by event security. Once in handcuffs, the suspect identified where he discarded the weapon, and that weapon has been recovered, and he implied that he committed the offense.
U.S. President Donald Trump has condemned the killings based, he says, on anti-Semitism. He has offered his condolences to families of the victims. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has expressed shock at what he called a horrific anti-Semitic murder. He says security will be ramped up at embassies worldwide. Nick Harper joins us live from Washington, D.C. Nick, what's the latest first out of the U.S. Capitol? And given the U.S. president himself is linking this to what he calls anti-Semitism, how are people reacting to this killing?
Well, I think many people here in the United States are waking up this morning, seeing the news, which is the top story on all channels here, not just in Washington, D.C., but really across the country, seeing this news and facing it with shock, revulsion, in many ways profound sadness, because we have received more details overnight about the young couple who were killed. They were both workers at the Israeli embassy here in Washington, D.C. The embassy has described them as being in the prime of their lives. The embassy saying they are heartbroken and devastated. And from Israel's ambassador to the United States, we've learned that he was on the point of proposing to his girlfriend in the course of the next week. But of course, they were shot dead outside of that museum late last night. We have seen plenty of reaction, including, as you mentioned, from the US president just a moment ago, but from lawmakers across both sides of the aisle. The Democratic mayor for Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, has said that they will not tolerate any acts of terrorism. We've heard from one of the top Democratic lawmakers who is Jewish. We've heard from Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, who's described this as a horrific instance of anti-Semitism. And of course, it's not just here that we've had those messages of support and condolences also coming from Israel as well, all the way from the top. The president is Isaac Herzog saying that he is devastated by the shooting and calling it a despicable act of hatred and anti-Semitism. In terms of the police investigation, the FBI, the police are looking at all of the links that the gunman may have had. They've said that he was not on their radar, but there is a very strong chance that this will be looked at now as either a hate crime, an act of domestic terrorism, or simply an anti-Semitic attack.
Oh, this deadly shooting taking place in a febrile environment now. You've got Israel renewing its offensive in Gaza, outrage about the level of aid allowed into Gaza and the possible, or what is happening, the starvation in the Gaza Strip. Is this incident, how is it likely to impact official stance on Israel and its offensive?
Well, the big problem, of course, is that this appears to have been a targeted attack, targeting Jewish members of the DC community, an anti-Semitic attack at a time when we have seen that increase of the military offensive by Israel against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Now, we've seen other Western allies in the last few days, the UK, Canada and France, telling Israel that it must desist in its military operation. But what we might see here in the United States is Donald Trump and the Trump administration's position potentially hardening, continuing to back Israel in its military offensive. And then there is the question domestically of what it does at a time of campus protests across the United States that have been pro-Palestinian, pro-Gaza in nature. We've already seen the Trump administration arrest people who've taken part in those protests, largely because of their pro-Palestinian views. They've arrested some, they're trying to deport them from the United States. There is now that strong possibility that they may use this killing to equate that act of violence to these peaceful protests. And we may see that already very tense situation on various college campuses around the United States get even more tense as the Trump administration looks to capitalize on this killing and try and stop those acts of peaceful protest across the United States.
Oh, thanks for that. Nick Harper there in Washington, D.C.